Let's be real for a second. We all know the drill. Someone gets down on one knee, produces a velvet box, and suddenly, a standardized piece of compressed carbon determines if they truly love you. You post a photo, everyone comments, "Congratulations, darling," and we all collectively pretend this is an ancient, sacred tradition rooted in romance. Except it isn't. It's barely 80 years old. Your grandmother's grandmother probably didn't have a diamond engagement ring. The truth is, the modern engagement ring is perhaps the single most successful piece of psychological warfare in human history. It is a master class in gaslighting, invented by a ruthless cartel that needed to convince the average person to spend 2 months' salary on a shiny little rock with zero intrinsic value. Welcome to But Let's Make It Interesting. Today, we're spilling the tea on De Beers and how they didn't just sell a product, they hacked culture itself. To understand the scam, you have to understand the problem. Before the late 1800s, diamonds were genuinely rare. They were for actual queens and maharajas. But then, massive diamond mines were discovered in South Africa. Suddenly, diamonds weren't rare at all. They were everywhere. Now, anyone who took Econ 101 knows that when supply goes up, value goes down. The financiers backing these mines were panicking. They were sitting on mountains of shiny rocks that were rapidly becoming worthless because they were too easy to get. They realized that to keep prices high, they had to control the supply. They couldn't let the market function normally. They needed a monopoly. Enter Cecil Rhodes, a man with massive colonial ambition and very little moral compass. He bought up all the claims and consolidated them into one monolithic entity, De Beers Consolidated Mines. By 1902, De Beers controlled about 90% of the world's rough diamond production. They didn't just own the mines, they owned the pipeline. This is step 1 of the scam: artificial scarcity. Diamonds are not rare, they are just hoarded. De Beers stockpiled diamonds in London vaults, releasing only enough to keep prices just where they wanted them. They were essentially gatekeeping sparkle, but owning the supply wasn't enough. By the 1930s, the Great Depression hit. Nobody had money for bread, let alone useless jewelry. De Beers had a warehouse full of rocks and nobody to sell them to. They were desperate. They needed a miracle. They realized they couldn't just advertise diamonds as pretty jewelry. That wasn't enough to open wallets during a depression. They needed to change what a diamond meant. They needed to hire professional liars. In 1938, Harry Oppenheimer, the son of De Beers' founder, traveled from South Africa to New York City. He met with the advertising agency Ayer. The agency did some research, and the results were brutal. Americans thought diamonds were a waste of money. They were for the ultra-rich, and even the ultra-rich would rather spend money on cars or appliances, things that actually did something. Ayer realized they had a massive problem. They had to sell a product that nobody needed. The agency's internal memo from the time is terrifyingly brilliant. It said, "We are dealing with a problem in mass psychology. We want to make the diamond a cultural imperative." A cultural imperative? They didn't want you to want a diamond. They wanted you to feel like a social failure if you didn't have one. Their strategy was to bypass the logical part of your brain, the part that knows spending rent money on a rock is stupid, and aim directly for your insecurities about love and commitment. They decided to link the diamond to the only thing exponentially more valuable than money, eternal love. But they needed a slogan to tie it all together. In 1947, a female copywriter at the agency, Frances Garrity, was working late. Exhausted, she scribbled down 4 words that would change the world. A diamond is forever. It was perfect. It was also a total lie. Diamonds can shatter, they can burn, and their resale value immediately drops by about 50% the second you walk out of the store. But as a metaphor, it was indestructible. It implied that if you bought a diamond, your marriage would last forever. Conversely, if he didn't buy you a diamond, his love was temporary. They weaponized the fear of abandonment to sell jewelry. That, darling, is evil genius. They had the slogan, Now they needed the execution. How do you take a slogan and turn it into a mandatory social tax, levied on every young couple in the Western world? You don't just buy ads in magazines. You infiltrate Hollywood, the schools, and even the royal family. Ayer launched a multi-front assault on reality. First, Hollywood. They didn't just wait for diamonds to appear in movies, they wrote the scenes. They paid studios to include scenes where a man proposes with a diamond and the woman reacts with appropriate hysteria. They created the movie star engagement, knowing normal people would mimic what they saw on the silver screen. They were the original influencer marketers 70 years before TikTok. Next, they had to dictate the price. In the past, you spent what you could afford on a ring. De Beers needed to standardize the spend to ensure maximum profits. So they invented the salary rule. In the US, their ads suggested 1 month's salary. It was totally arbitrary. They just made it up, but it worked so well that in the 1980s, they got greedy. They ran campaigns featuring a gorgeous woman and a voiceover saying, "How else can 2 months' salary last forever?" Did you catch that? They literally told you how much to spend in the commercial. If they thought they could have gotten away with 6 months' salary, they would have tried it. They anchored the price in your mind before you even walked into the store. And it wasn't just America. In the 1960s, Japan had almost no tradition of diamond engagement rings. It wasn't their culture. De Beers saw a market. They flooded Japan with ads featuring Western-looking models getting engaged. Within 15 years, Japan went from almost 0 diamond engagement rings to over 60% of brides receiving one. They didn't just import a product, they imported a manufactured culture. But my favorite part of the scam is when they had to pivot. In the subsequent decades, new mines were found in places like Russia, but these mines produced mostly tiny diamonds, not big solitaires. De Beers had to sell these small, crappy rocks. How? They invented the eternity ring. They marketed it to older married couples with the tagline, "She married you for richer or poorer. Let her know how it's going." The implication being, if you aren't buying her more diamonds later in life, you're failing as a provider. They created a subscription model for guilt. So here we are today. The De Beers monopoly has largely broken up, thanks to lawsuits and new competitors. We now have lab-grown diamonds, which are chemically identical but cost way less, proving once and for all that the price of natural diamonds is totally artificial. But the brainwashing, that's still intact. We still judge the size of the rock. We still follow the 2-month rule. We still act out a script written by grumpy old men in a boardroom in the 1930s. If you want to unlearn the history of everything you've been sold, hit that subscribe button. We have a lot of tea to spill. Until next time, stay interesting.